Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to work on showing text on the screen to let us know that the game is starting. And this is the first step to showing the countdown timer to let the player know that the game has not quite started yet, but it will start soon. Now this is going to involve Blueprint implementable events. A Blueprint implementable event is a C++ function that we can call from C++, but we actually implement the functionality on the Blueprint side. So we may have our C++ class, such as the game mode, and we can have a function marked as a Blueprint implementable event, and then we can implement that behavior in Blueprints. So when we call the C++ function marked as a Blueprint implementable event, then the event in the Blueprint will be fired off, and any Blueprint logic that we connect to that event in the Blueprint will be called. So I'm going to create a Blueprint implementable event function here in ToonTank's GameMode.h, and Blueprint implementable events cannot be private, so I'm going to add this to the protected section. Now I'm going to make this a void function, and I'm simply going to call this startGame. Now, in order to make this a Blueprint implementable event, I have to give it a uFunction macro with the uFunction specifier Blueprint implementable event. Now, once we mark this Blueprint implementable event, we don't even need to give it a function body here in C++. Unreal Engine will expect us to implement the functionality for this in Blueprints. But we can call it from C++, and that's exactly what we're going to do here in handle game start. So just after we've set the tank and the player controller variables, I'm going to call start game. And now we can compile this. And hopping back here in the editor, I'm going to open BP ToonTank's game mode. And here is where we can implement the function. So if we right click and type start game, then here is the event start game that was created as soon as we declared the function and gave it the uFunction macro with Blueprint implementable event. So on the C++ side, we're calling this, and in Blueprints, this event is responding to it. We can test this out with a simple print string node, and for the string, we can say start game. Now, if we hit play, I'll see start game at the top left. So we know that our Blueprint implementable event is working. Now, what we'd like this event to do is to show a widget which contains text informing the player that the game is about to start, which means we need to create a widget to show. So I'm going to create a new folder in the Blueprints folder, and I'm going to call this Widgets. And I'm going to double-click Widgets, and here is where I'm going to create a new widget blueprint. Now, if I right-click and go to User Interface, here is Widget Blueprint. Now, if I click this, I'll create a new widget blueprint, and I'm going to call this WBP for widget blueprint _ start game widget. And if I double click this, then I'll open the widget blueprint editor. And you'll see that it looks quite a bit different than the blueprint editor we're used to seeing. And that's because this is for a widget. Widgets are good for displaying things on the screen like text. Now there's a lot here, and we're only going to make a very basic widget that shows text. There are a number of different types of elements we can add to a widget blueprint, such as borders, buttons, checkboxes, images, and so on. But what we're interested in is this one right here, which says text. Now look down here in the hierarchy panel, you'll see that we have the overall WBP start game widget at the top, and if we click on that, we can change properties for this widget. And just under it, we have something called a canvas panel. Now, a canvas panel allows us to place widget elements and set them at a desired location on the screen. So we can drag a text element straight onto the graph, and you'll see in the hierarchy this new item under canvas panel, and it says text block. Now this text block in quotes is the text that's automatically set for this text widget. And here in the details panel with this text widget selected, under content, we see a text property and it's set to text block. But we can set this to any text we want, such as get ready. Now after setting this to get ready, you'll see that the text here on the screen says get ready. So the widget blueprint editor allows us to customize our widgets. Notice at the top left of the screen, this medallion thing here, this is called an anchor. Our text widget is placed on the screen relative to the anchor. So if the screen size changes, the distance from that anchor will remain constant, and we can change the anchor if we want to. For instance, we can set our text widget relative to an anchor in the middle of the screen by going over to the Details panel, and under Slot, we see Anchors, and if I click the dropdown, I can select this icon, which has a square in the middle. If I select that, now the anchor is in the center of the screen. And if I want my widget completely centered, I can change its position X and Y here under the slot category. So I can set this to 0 for position X and 0 for position Y. And scrolling with my mouse wheel to zoom in, you'll see that its upper left corner is in the middle of the screen. Now this alignment field here can let us center this perfectly by choosing values of 0.5 for X and 0.5 for Y. And now it's completely centered in the middle of the screen. Now for a start game widget, it's probably going to be appropriate to put this text a little bit higher up. So for position Y, I can click and drag this to the left, which will make that position Y value negative. In the widget blueprint editor, the y-axis points downward, so if we want to raise our text widget up, we're going to make that position y a lower value. I'm going to place it up here at about -300. Now, down in the appearance category, I can change a number of properties for this text. If I click the drop-down for font, I can change the font size to say something like 42. Now for typeface, instead of bold, I like the regular typeface. I think it looks a bit better. Now notice that our text widget text is larger than the green rectangle here, but we can resize this green rectangle. And as I'm changing the rectangle, you'll see here in the Details panel that size X and size Y are changing. Now notice position X has moved a bit since I've changed it. I can put it back to 0, and since alignment for the X is 0.5, it's perfectly centered. So now I have a widget that says, "Get ready." The only thing left to do is to add this to the viewport so we can see it on the screen. You'll notice that if I hit play and start playing the game, that I do not see that widget on the screen. That's because we have to actively add this to the screen, and that's why we created this blueprint implementable event in the game mode so that we can add this widget to the screen here. So let's talk about how to do that. Now, the way to create a widget from blueprints is by the use of a Create Widget node. You can right-click in the event graph for any blueprint and start typing the name of a node, and then select that particular node. The node we need is Create Widget. Now, you'll see that it says Create WBP Coolness Widget, and that's because as soon as I added the Create Widget node, I selected the Widget Blueprint class here in the class dropdown. This is necessary so that Unreal Engine knows which widget class to create. Now, after using a Create Widget node, we use an Add to Viewport node to actually add this widget to the viewport, and then we can see it on the screen in the game. Notice that the execution wires are connected, and also that the Create Widget node returns this blue output, and this should be connected to the target input in Add to Viewport, since Add to Viewport needs to know which widget to add to the viewport, and the Create Widget node returns the value of that widget. So now that you know how to create a widget in Blueprints, you're going to go into the BP Toontanks Game Mode class and use a Create Widget node. You're going to hook this up from our Blueprint Implementable Event execution wire that we called Start Game. Now, in the Create Widget node, we need to select the widget class to create, so select WBP Start Game Widget, that new widget blueprint that we just created, and then use an Add to Viewport node to actually add this new widget to the viewport and hook up the execution wires, and don't forget to hook up the return value from Create Widget to the target input in Add to Viewport. So pause the video and add these nodes to the Toontanks Game Mode blueprint now. So I'm here in the Toontanks Game Mode blueprint, and I'm going to right-click and type Create Widget and choose the Create Widget node. Now notice it says construct none, and that's because it's going to say that until we select the appropriate widget class in the class dropdown. But before I do that, I'm going to hook up the execution wire from event start game so we actually get this functionality executed as soon as our blueprint implementable event start game is called from C++. Now for the class dropdown, I'm going to select WBP start game widget, and now the node's title changes to say create WBP start game widget widget. So now we can see that this is a create widget node. Now I'm going to click the execution wire and drag out and then type add to viewport. And then if I select add to viewport, then the execution wires are automatically connected for me, but it doesn't connect the return value from create widget to the target input for add to viewport. So I need to click and drag that myself. So now when start game gets called from C++ in the game mode class, we will execute this blueprint logic, which will result in creating a new widget based on WBP start game widget, and then we will add it to the viewport. So I'm going to click play, and there's the get ready widget. Now we mentioned that this is going to show a countdown timer, but we haven't implemented that functionality just yet. So that's coming soon. So in summary, we created the start game widget blueprint, and for now it just has text on it that says get ready. We also used a create widget node and an add to viewport node to add this widget to the viewport so we can see it as soon as the game starts, and we initiated this functionality using our blueprint implementable event that we created in the game mode C++ class called start game. In the videos to come, we're going to change the text in this widget at runtime so that it shows how much time is left on that start game timer so the player knows how much time to wait before they can start actually playing the game. I'll see you soon.